Hi there! In this tutorial I wanted to go over a common problem that you encounter when doing blueprints in Unreal Engine. Let me show you the problem and you'll see what I mean. What I have here is 4 different blueprints. Now at the moment they just look different and we could have an argument about how you'd implement them, but let's say each one of these will do similar functionality. So for example, it will just display some text saying what it is when you look at it, and some of them might do completely different functionality, like when you click on one of them they blow up, or whatever your functionality is. One pattern that one does a lot of the time is the following. Let me just show it. So for example, this is in the first person character. When you've got an event tick, you might have a delay, so you're not doing it on every single frame, so every fifth of a frame. And we are doing a line trace from where we're looking at, and if we hit it, let's just do a print string so we know what we're hitting. Print string, and let's get the actual hit object that we're doing. So when we run this, what will happen is that as we're looking at things, we can see it's telling us what they are. Right now, that's all fine, but let's say I only want it to happen. Let's say I want it, if this has text on it, I want it to appear, it'll say like you're looking at a ball, or you're looking at a cylinder, or something like that. So in our first person blueprint, we might cast it. So for example, we'd do, cast to BP sphere, not sky sphere. Let's try casting it to the right thing. Cast to BP sphere, right? So, and then you might do the printing, then you'll run some function on it. So it'll be whatever your function is going to be. Let's say in this case is going to be say sphere, right? Now when we run that, nothing happens for all of these other ones, but when we hit the sphere we get something popping up saying sphere, right? Now that's fine, but for just having a sphere, but what we'd have to do is implement it for all of them. So you might do something like a sequence. So if we do sequence, and then we'd go like, okay, well, if it's not a sphere, we're going to cast it to, let's say, a cone, right? Cast to a cone, and we're going to now print that this is a cone, and so on and so forth. So now we've got something. So yes, let's put the actor that we're casting and clean up our blueprint a little bit. And so now we have a cone and we've got a sphere, but we want this interaction to happen to a lot of objects, and you might have hundreds of blueprints in your game that you want the same functionality, but you don't want to be checking if it's on a list of different blueprints. So how do we do this? Well, the solution is actually an interface. So what we can say is that for it to return some text, what it is, which you'll probably want to do anyway. So let's do that, for example. Okay, so here in our sphere, let's just compile it. I've got a text field called hover text, right? So for each instance, we can change what it says. So in the sense, for my sphere, I've got, well, sphere, or let's say something more fun. This is a sphere. Well, that's all grand, but what I'd have to check in my first person blueprint is, if it's a sphere, go and get the hover text or whatever. And we'd have to do the same thing for a cylinder and for a cone and for a box, which I've actually put that field. But what I might want to do is actually call the same function on all of them. But how do I know if they all have them? This is where interfaces come in. So let's create an interface. You can find it under blueprints, and you can see a blueprint interface. So I'm going to start with an I. This is my naming convention. You can use whatever naming conventions, like say interface or whatever. I'm going to put I hover text, right? So in the iHoverText interfaces, all they do is say what functions your object should have. So let's say I'm going to do a get hover text function. That hover text function is going to have a new output, and you can see this is what it's kind of going to look like. I'm going to call it hover text, and what is going to actually return is a text. Okay, so this is an interface that all of my blueprints are going to implement. So let's go and implement them. So if I go into my cone and I go into the class settings right here at the top, you can actually see which interfaces you can add. So I'm going to put i_hoverText, and the moment I add this interface, over here in the interfaces you can see some text. If I double click this, this is my actual implementation of that function. So I can now get the hover text and say that's what I'm actually going to return. Okay, I'm going to actually quickly do this for all the other items, and actually go to class settings, add an interface, i_hoverText. This already has the function, so let's delete that. This I had already implemented this earlier when I was testing this out. So let's edit these again. We don't need to play it. Let's go and add a i_hoverText. Implement that by outputting this hoverText. Great. Cylinder, do the same thing. Let's delete the implemented function. Let's put the class defaults. iHoverText. And we're nearly done. So I can just implement this function, put that in. Now go to the cube and do the last thing of adding an iHoverText. So now all of my objects that will do hover texting, for example, have the same function called getHoverText. So let me just compile and compile. So what does our first person blueprint now look like? So instead of having the sequence of casting everything else, we can now just ask the question, does this actor, does it have an interface? So does implement interface. Oh, okay, so does it implement the hover text interface? If it does that, then I can do some logic based on that. In this case, it's going to be running the get hover text function. So you can just type get hover text of this object. Since it does implement it, it does run it. So now we can actually have a print string, or you'd actually be piping this text to a widget or something like that. So let's now try this. So now that we look at it, you can see that it's actually saying cone. This one's saying this is a sphere. We can say that this is a cylinder, etc. And if we were to change these, so cone head, get another instance of this, move it to the side, cone, other cone, and if we now press play, you can see that's the other cone, and it works like that. This means, extending that you could create other interfaces, for example, if it's breakable, right? So we can have another blueprint interface, breakable, and you could have a function of break me. You could return a true whether it's broken. Yeah. Is broken, right? And now you could say that not only does your, let's say your cube break, but not only does it implement the hover text, but you could also implement something else, such as it's also breakable. So now you can have break me as one of the functions that it does. This would be, for example, destroy actor, you know, destroy actor self, and however you implement that, you could test it, let's say when you're clicking on it. So hopefully you get now an idea of how you can implement various functionalities and add it to all your blueprints without having to then cast them. So then the two functions that you really want to know is does implement interface, and then the actual function that you run it. And generally you run it individually rather than off the actor. So you don't even have to cast it. You can just say run the function that comes from this interface. I hope that helps. Hopefully this video has been useful for you. Let me know in the comments, and remember to like and subscribe to this video. It's a requirement for me to say this, but put anything in the comments if you need any clarification. I'm always happy to get back to you and create other videos that hopefully help you. Anyway, bye. Like and subscribe.